Welcome to In All Honesty, the podcast where we get real about life and all the problems that come with it. I'm Michelle Elman, and I'm that friend who we all know is a little bit too honest. You might not come to me when you get back together with your ex, but I'll be there for you when it all goes tits up. Welcome back to In All Honesty, and today's co-host is Hannah Witton. I actually think you are the person I have followed longest on the internet.
Oh, I love that.
And to this day, like half of my Watch Later playlist is you. And the only reason you're in the Watch Later playlist is because I actually concentrate when I watch your videos.
So you need to save this for...
Yeah. And also because they're like meaty videos, I'm like, okay, this is a Hannah Witton evening. I'm just going to sit and like watch them.
Oh, nice. I just did a video review of a video that my editor sent in that said hour and 20 minutes long. So you're welcome.
I love those videos. But why don't you introduce yourself to everyone else who doesn't know you?
I'm Hannah Witton. I am a YouTube creator. I've had many podcasts in the day. I've been a creator for over a decade. Was in sex and relationships education, and now kind of doing more of the lifestyle stuff, whilst also having this huge pivot to now being a coach and a consultant for creators.
And when you made that pivot, I thought it was one of the most brave, vulnerable things. I think I texted you at the time being like, wow. Because,
you did that.
Yeah. I was like, I didn't want to be like, are you not scared? But like, I actually was like, I admired it. I'd had feelings to do similar, and I probably had done similar in the past, but the way you pivoted, I thought it was brave. I thought it was inspirational. But before we get into that massive career change, I actually just want to shine a bit of a spotlight on Hannah, because how we met, this is one of my favorite stories. I think it was 2017.
Mm-hmm. I think you cold emailed me.
I did.
Yeah.
And this is where I do think you're just an amazing person, and I'm not trying to blow smoke, but I actually think there aren't many influencers who would reply to a cold email and then actually go for coffee with that person.
It was just a great email, clearly. I was like, I need to know this woman.
But also, I didn't actually know. It was a lot about Scarred Not Scared. So for those of you who don't know, I started in body positivity. I was posting about body confidence and surgery scars. And I had emailed Hannah, who I didn't actually know at the time, had health issues in the past, but had been in remission. Is that the right term?
Yeah, I was in remission.
For quite a while. And so it was only when we went for coffee. But even the fact that you replied to me, because I did probably send that email out to a few people, and the fact that I actually followed Hannah. And then what came from that meeting was me talking to you about how I'm trying to get this book published and I wasn't being very successful. I didn't have a big following at the time. I probably had about 10,000 followers. And then you invited me to be a part of your book. And this is before I'd got the book deal for Am I Ugly?
Yeah, you wrote a chapter in my first book.
I wrote a chapter in your first book. And then that led to that publisher reaching out to me, gave me a book offer that I actually had to turn down because I already had Am I Ugly written.
Oh,
but it gave me so much hope and momentum. And I was so down when we had met, because I had been going through so many issues within the publishing industry. And that was the day I also met Holly Bourne, who at your book launch was like, what are you doing with your agency? Why are they taking 2 months to reply to you? Dump them. So I took her very literally, went home that evening, dumped my agency. And then the next time I would see Holly is at the agency Christmas party, because I ended up signing to her agency.
Amazing.
And she was freaked out because she was like, don't listen to me. I say things like this. She said this flippantly at a party, and I took it word for word, went home and did it, dumped my agency that evening, sent 10 emails off. I literally went down Google being like top 10 agencies in the UK, email 10. And thank God I ended up at an agency, and within a month of joining that agency, I got a book deal. So actually...
And now you're like about to publish your, fifth book or something?
But genuinely, none of it would have happened without you. Being in a book...
I love like being all smug about it. Like, I didn't really do anything, but I'm glad to have been part of the journey.
You did a lot. Like, you gave me a lot of faith, and also like when you're getting so many no's. Yeah. And I think like I've been writing this friendship book, and one of the parts that I'm writing about it is this theory called shine theory, where like if I shine, you shine too. Yeah. And I actually think you're also a very shiny person, like with all your sun and yellow. But like I do think you're one of those people where throughout the whole industry, you have always uplifted the people around you, which I think is why it really made sense to me that you're going into the coaching, you're going into more of the behind the scenes of the social media and trying to help those who want to become an influencer. Because to be honest, you've always been doing that. You kind of did it for me. I wouldn't be where I was today without women like you.
And I think that's one of the reasons why for me it was so clear that that's what I wanted to do next. Was because when I was like looking at my whole career and thinking about like when are the moments that I get like really fired up and really excited, it is when I'm having conversations with other creators and like picking apart their business, and they're like, oh, I've got this dilemma and I'm trying to figure out like what to do, like XYZ. I remember like talking with you at like the women's prize party, and you were like, what do I do with my like newsletter? And, like, and there was just like, I'm like, yeah, let's get our teeth stuck
But also
into
Hannah
it.
was like, you're doing too much.
Yeah.
Do less.
And then you ended up doing nothing.
I ended up doing less. And by doing less, I realized I didn't want to be doing it at all. So I stopped it. Like I quit. I literally, my last article on Substack is I quit.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe I played a role in that.
But it's great conversations like that. But also I remember you host a lot of like networking events. Like you were trying your feet with that. And was
pre-pandemic, baby, though.
But was that the beginning of you questioning whether you wanted to make a career change in some way?
I don't know if that was like the beginning of the questioning, because honestly, Michelle, I've been questioning it since the beginning.
You have to in this industry. Everyone's telling you the social media bubble will burst. This is not a long-term career. So you always are guessing like, what's the next step? What's the next step?
Yeah, I've been making YouTube videos and then generally content online since 2011. So it's been like 13 years, almost 14 years now. And I've gone through so many phases of like, I'm just going to pack it in. I just want to quit. I'm so done. I just want to go get a normal job. I hate this. And then something will happen and like, entice me back in.
Do you ever have those moments where you're like, oh, I wish I could have a 9 to 5 and then clock out at 5 p.m. because I don't remember the last time I actually ever clocked out. Like I have that dream a lot.
A little bit, but I think having a partner who works a traditional job and now having a kid, like I
don't want a 9 to 5.
I got very good at clocking myself out of work and like setting those boundaries for myself.
When I had a partner like that, I was a lot better, especially with weekends, because like weekends would be the only time we really had quality time. So I was better at like actually having. I also think having a partner who wasn't on social media was better for my boundaries around social media.
Same for me. And I just think that it's been years of ups and downs, and then having a baby, and then completely like restructuring how I worked was kind of the final thing that kind of exacerbated a lot of the issues that I was having. It then also led to things that just required more urgent attention. So whereas before I would just like go through the waves of it, of the ups and downs, but ultimately everything was fine. After having Rowan, it was like, actually my mental and emotional I'm not as in it as I was. My motivation isn't in it. And financially as well, I was like, oh, this is not going to last much longer.
So I think that's the part that confuses people, because people would see, how many followers did your main channel have?
Almost 800,000.
So people see that number and they equate that to money. I think that obviously I know from being in the industry, you were making sex education content.
Yeah.
That will affect your AdSense.
Yeah.
That affects your ability to do brand deals and all of that. But we still have this very narrow mindset of big follower count means big income. No. And so a lot of people would have thought by you turning your back on that or like stopping posting on that channel, that actually was the more financially risky move.
It was because a lot of my overheads had increased as well. So there was like a calculation that I had to do in terms of like, oh, okay, if I'm going to stop making the sex ed videos, so like one YouTube channel, just going to completely stop uploading on, and doing it podcast, so like the sex ed podcast, I was like, you know, getting rid of like some big chunks of my portfolio.
Yeah.
I had to like figure out, okay, how much money does that mean I'm going to be losing? But also how much money am I going to be saving? Because those things were expensive to make. Yeah. And so
you had an office as well.
I had a studio space.
And you had a team of 2.
Kind of 2, 3, depending on the projects. Yeah. So there were a lot of overheads that I managed to cut down on from making that move.
Because it's interesting, when I asked my followers for questions, the main thing was when you make a career shift, you almost have to accept a loss in income.
Yeah, which I have as well, but I'd already had an even more significant loss of income after I had my baby.
And that's kind of something that isn't really spoken about, how when you're a freelancer especially, so much of the work revolves around you working, that if you stop, income stops.
I took 3 months off. I didn't post any YouTube videos or podcasts for 3 months.
And that's long for our industry.
That is a long time.
Yeah. I mean, ideally you'd have 6 months, because even 3 months is very short.
Yeah, I would have wanted 6 months, but when I was looking at other creators who are mums and seeing the amount of time that they'd taken off, because, you know, there's no blueprint, like no one tells you how to do things, and you're freelance, you're self-employed, there is no business without you. And so I was like, okay, I've seen some creators take 3 days mat leave, and then the maximum I'd seen people take was 3 months. So in my head, I was like, okay, I can take 3 months off and everything will be fine.
3 days. Can you imagine being
literally
that
watched a video of a creator like holding her newborn baby, being like, just had a baby 3 days ago, and like making a YouTube video. I was like, that I could never.
No, I mean, they must have an editor behind the scenes, because I can't imagine sitting at my computer editing a vlog like while being sleep deprived, full of hormones coming out, all of it, like
leaking.
Having a baby is a huge part of it. But also, do you think the pandemic affected your mindset around all of this? Like, there was so much time in the pandemic where we were like reflecting, and we almost like, I don't know, unconsciously had the time to assess our lives.
I don't know, because I got pregnant towards the end of lockdowns.
Okay.
And so really it was like, oh, everyone's like getting back into things. And I was like, I am retreating into my pregnancy baby hole. And then really the kind of big reflections happened after I got back to work, just because I was taking that 3 months off, and then I went back to work part-time. I was only doing half days.
Yeah.
And we were putting out the same amount of content, and I'd hired a new person onto the team to help take a lot off of my plate during mat leave and during me like transitioning back to work in this part-time basis. So obviously my expenses had gone up massively. And then, I got back to work. I was working half the amount of time, massively sleep deprived, and still putting out 2 videos and a podcast every week.
We are such different people. Anytime I hear you talk about this kind of stuff, I'm like, I just, the idea of it is already like, you can see it on my face. I'm like, Jesus,
I look back on it
and
I'm like, what was I doing? And I didn't really feel it at the time. But I was like, something had to have suffered. And reflecting on it now, what had really suffered was, I think, the quality-ish of the content, but also my connection to it and my like investment, my emotional investment in it, because I'd outsourced so much. Other people were writing scripts for me. Other people were editing it. Other people were producing it. I kind of just like came in, approved scripts, gave edit notes, and talked to the camera. And so there was like that emotional distance that I'd created by outsourcing so much.
Yeah.
And then my interest in the videos and my interest in the topics was kind of like slowly waning over time.
But I also think following you around that time, it seemed like you were doing more passion projects. Like, they weren't videos that were like necessarily going to perform well on YouTube. But actually, as a follower, a lot of the videos look like you just thought it would be fun.
So
and
that's what happened.
I loved that. But like, obviously that's not what the algorithm loves.
Exactly. And that's kind of what happened the following year. So we kind of had that situation where I was working half days up until the end of the year. And then I came into that new year last year being like, okay, something needs to change because I will run out of money at some point. But I was like, but we're not there yet. We're still able to like take some risks and kind of see what we can make of this. And so I called last year my Go Big or Go Home year, which is where all of these like videos.
You know which one's coming to mind? The one where you go into the back room of a sex museum, is it?
Oh, we went to like the Bishopsgate
and you're
archive.
going through the shelves. It was a fascinating video. It's not going to perform well because it's like 40 minutes long or an hour
not.
even.
Yeah.
But like
the nerds loved it though. The comments were incredible, but yeah, it didn't
I
perform very well.
I wouldn't even identify as a nerd. I loved it. Like I watched the whole video. I remember I was in the middle of cooking. I stopped cooking and I just started watching it. It was like,
okay, I love
wow.
that, yeah.
Like, but it kind of breaks my heart whenever a creator does that, because I was like, you can tell it's bringing you joy.
Yeah.
I wish this is the kind of stuff that the algorithm would push, because actually there are so many people who would love this kind of content, but in order to enjoy it, they have to already be invested in you, and that it's like bringing you joy and all of that. And I just think that's where sometimes the whole industry is moving towards more like clickbait, short attention span.
Or the other way, which is like fan-funded content. So like I wouldn't have been able to survive as long as I had with making YouTube videos, especially sex and relationships ones, because of the, you know, the AdSense that I would get on them wouldn't even pay for my editor.
Yeah.
But it's things like Patreon and like things like that. It's just, that is kind of what helped to fund most of it. But yeah, so last year, we just like went through all of these like video ideas that were like these big things that were like just a bit more ambitious to make and would take longer to make, involved more people. So again, it cost more money. But they were just like the ones that I was like,
you're
I want
quite
to do
good
it.
about paying anyone who's involved. And that's probably not something you say publicly, but I know, having worked with you, that you are so good about that.
Yeah.
And I think that's not something that is normalized in our industry.
I'd already run out of steam. I like started that year being like, we're going to do this one and we're going to do this video and it's going to be great. And then I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm done. And actually I had some coaching. So I'd seen a coach before when I was pregnant, when I was trying to figure out, I was like, what do I even want to do for my maternity leave? How do I want to navigate this? And so I'd spoken to a coach and she really helped me figure out my whole like 3-month plan situation. And so I went back to her again and was like, something needs to change because I'm running out of steam and I'm running out of money. And it was through conversations with her, but then also just like a lot of
How did you find your career coach?
Really randomly, I was doing some work for Ali Abdul with his part-time YouTuber Academy course. When there was a live cohort, there would be like groups of different creators, like people who were paid to be on the course to like learn how to make YouTube videos. And there would be like house captains and who were established YouTubers who basically would host like weekly group or monthly group sessions with them to kind of like hold everyone accountable, like answer questions.
That sounds so up your street.
I loved it. And she was one of the participants because, she is a like doctorate PhD in creativity, also a career coach, a creative coach. And she was a mum, and just, you know, you just get vibes from people. And so she was like in one of my
resonated.
She was just in one of my cohorts, and I was just like, oh, I really like you.
Yeah. It's one of the main questions I get asked is how to find good coaches. And to be honest, I've been with mine for 10 years, so I've not tried to look for one.
Yeah.
And I think I've had some bad experience with coaches, but like once you find the only way I can tell people to find it feels right, like, and that you resonate with the person. And if you're sat in a session and they're saying things and you're going, that doesn't feel right, or like,
I think as well, because she was a woman and a mum, and her kind of approach to things was what I needed at the time. Like there are so many kind of career business coaches out there who are a bit more like masculine, a bit more like hustle culture, bro vibes,
work harder, like faster, non-stop, 24/7.
And I was like, no, that's not what I need right now. I need things have changed. I'm actually looking to possibly downsize, and I need someone to take all of this on, not like I'm a failure. And actually that it's still a form of growth. And I trusted her with that.
As a coach, my thing would be, if I was coaching someone through career, I would look at what your values are, what your priorities are. Was that the kind of thing that she was doing? Yeah,
we kind of took a look at a lot of the projects that I was doing, like every single like thing, like the 2 YouTube channels, podcast, my Patreon, newsletter, social media, like, and then potential future ideas for things. And then, looked at kind of what my values were in terms of like my decision-making criteria of like what was important to me, of like the costs of something and the benefits of doing something. And then literally like we gave things numbers and
So at this point, you know what you're doing right now doesn't work.
Yeah.
But you don't actually know what you want to do next.
Yeah.
And that took, what, a few months to figure out?
Yeah. And
have you completely figured it out yet? Or is it still like figuring it out?
well, I made a huge decision, so I'd figured out some of it. I'd
Yeah.
figured like the kind of answer that eventually came from me, and like literally I remember it like settling on me during like a peer coaching session with two of my friends. I kind of like presented them with my predicament, and they weren't allowed to give me any advice, and they just had to ask me questions for like 20 minutes straight, just like probing me. And it just got to the point where like I'd answered my own question. I was like, oh, I think I need to do this. And it was amazing. And so once I'd kind of
Was
realized,
this all through your career coach?
No, this was just like me and two friends getting together and having like a day where we called it our like sorting our shit out day.
Yeah.
And so we all kind of like.
But how did you come up with that exercise if they're not allowed to comment or anything, just could only ask questions?
One of my friends who was there, Taha, he was like, oh, I think actually he'd done it with Ali. And so, yeah, we each kind of like present what our dilemma or thing that we want to work through is. And then the other two people aren't allowed to give advice and they can only ask questions.
That's a great exercise.
It's
like,
an amazing
I've
exercise
not heard
and anyone
that one, but
can do
it's
it.
really great.
Yeah.
And also, it should always be with people you trust, I would say.
Yes.
And that who aren't going to then suddenly go into... Because it's very vulnerable as well to
It's
do
so vulnerable, yeah.
that exercise, that it has to be with people you trust and who will actually abide by the rules as well.
Because if they ask good questions, and also it could be useful if they understand the industry or whatever the predicament is, because then their questions can be quite specific.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was very revealing. And what it ultimately revealed to me was that I wanted to stop the sex ed work.
I think you've always been quite intuitive around, because I just had a flashback as you were talking of one of the networking events you held. Your biggest dilemma going into that was whether to start a second channel. And I remember me saying, bad idea, too much work, don't do it. Like, and I probably didn't say it like that, but I was on this side of like, we had debated it as a room or whatever.
Yeah.
It was at your flat. And I was like, no, I wouldn't. Like, I was like, it doesn't perform well. It's so much work.
Oh, was this the one that I hosted at my flat?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And I was so on the camp. The moment you started your second channel, I was like, I was so wrong. Like, this is such a different
Good job
side.
I didn't listen to you.
No, 100%. But like, this is where I wasn't trying to be a life coach. I was 100% just as a person in the industry, had seen people start a second channel and just get burnt out by it.
Honestly, great decision past me, because having the second channel and being able to separate, okay, this channel is only sex and relationship stuff. This channel is going to be lifestyle and whatever the hell I want to make. It was amazing for my organization and just like separating things mentally in my head at the time. It was amazing. But then 4 years later, when it then came to quitting sex ed, I already had this very healthy lifestyle channel with an audience ready to go.
Also, the reason why I said that at the time, I actually think is because I didn't know this other side of you until you started that second channel. Obviously, I knew you as a human, but like, and I knew you were very organized. I could tell that every time you spoke about having your teas, because as I said, like some of the Excel spreadsheets you talk about were like, I'm like, oh my God, that's my idea of hell. I can't. If our brains could be like more, I just don't think they could be more different. Like, I am the definition of a creative, airy, fairy, flowy. Like, we'll see if an idea drops into my lap. I am so like, I just go with things.
I love that.
And you're not. You're very organized, structured. How you manage your team is amazing. Like, and actually, one of the conversations we had at the Women's Prize Party was you were like, you can have systems in place. And I just went, I'm not sure I want them.
You don't want the systems.
But the thing is
Fair enough. It's not for everyone.
What I didn't know is that you have this almost like secondary area of content that's like organization, finances, all this stuff I'm not good at. And I learned so much from that second channel that actually it is two completely different audiences. Yeah. I think where I was coming from when I said it was actually at that point, so many people were burning out. Yeah. And I was like, running a second channel is a really big thing. Little did I know 2 years later, I'd start running my TikTok. And my TikTok basically is the amount of time of a second channel. Yeah. There are days I post 12 TikToks in a day. Like, it's tiring.
Yeah, I have no idea how you do that.
but I'm not running a YouTube account and I'm not running a second YouTube account.
Yeah.
So actually, I think it was more a reflection of the industry that I'd said that to you.
Yeah.
But I was wrong.
But there wasn't.
I'll fully put my hands up. I was so wrong.
But there definitely was a whole wave of people starting second channels. And that was like before I'd started mine. So I get it, because I'd seen people like do that, where they'd start a second channel and then just like not have the capacity to.
And it would like flop within two
Yeah,
weeks,
exactly.
like.
But for me, again, always being very strategic, I knew that I would never start a second channel unless I had the capacity to.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten to the point with my team and with the finances of the business where I was like, I felt really confident that I could do it. And yeah, it was good,
And you
good
probably
decision past me.
You probably thought about it for like, I would say almost 6 months before you actually decided to make the jump.
For the channel.
Yeah, the second channel.
Yeah, I can't remember when those conversations happened actually. So long ago. But I would have definitely I would have definitely done
It makes
lots
me
of
think how
planning.
long we've known each other.
But
we've actually known each other quite a while now.
Yeah. Quitting the sex ed stuff, that decision came to me, and like that session that I had with my friends was early July. And then I had like sat with it, thought about it for a good amount of time, and then started making a plan. And then I didn't tell my team until I really had a plan until early September. And then, so that's already like 2 months of me knowing and me like figuring things out, then telling my team what was going to happen. And then between September and the end of the year was when we then planned and then executed.
So I asked my followers for a bunch of questions about going through big career changes, pivots in their career, or even just being in that phase that you spoke about of knowing you're not at the right point, but not knowing the next point.
Yeah.
So the first question is, what were the fears you had about doing it, making that jump?
Money, losing income, even though I'd already lost lots. So it was kind of like always worrying about that. A big loss of identity of like having been the person who was like the sex one, making sex ed content for years, and then being like, nope, I'm done. And so being like, okay, who am I then? Like, and I will say like this year, it has been harder when people have been like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I make YouTube videos. And they're like, what about? And I'm like, lifestyle. It's not as interesting as me being like, sex ed.
Well, if I had to define you, not that that's a great thing to do anyway, I would actually say it's more around the insight of the creator industry. Like, do you get what I mean?
Yeah. Well, do you know what? That's some of the feedback that I've gotten as well, is that kind of like I sit in the lifestyle space. Plus, I'll give like a little sneak peek behind the curtain and the behind the scenes of the creator industry and what it's like to be an influencer.
Finances, the organization, lifestyle.
That can be my USP.
Broad, where like
it's so broad,
and also lifestyle means such different things to different people. I actually only discovered I was a lifestyle creator like 2 weeks ago when I went to Meta and they listed all the like lifestyle pillars, and I was like, oh, I'm a lifestyle creator. Didn't know that.
There you go. Welcome.
So how do you handle the uncertainty of not knowing the answers, and how do you sink into the ability to like trust that they will come at some point?
I just remember feeling very untethered, and I remember just feeling very like in my desperation of like feeling very lost. I would look in all different places. So obviously I spoke to my career coach, I spoke to friends, peers, colleagues, my partner, my family. I was just drawn to stories of YouTubers quitting, moving on, like you know, just like absorbing and reading information. There was like a podcast that I was binging that was called Should I Quit? That's a sign. It was about all sorts of different things. It was like, should I quit?
I don't know whether you're on the fence. Yeah. Oh, my favorite podcast right now is Should I Quit?
But it was all about like personal and work and like, so, you know, I was seeking out all this stuff. So that's kind of what my strategy was just kind of like, I was in data gathering mode of like, I just need as many opinions, insights, and I had a tarot reading, like literally
anything.
I was just like,
you know what, to me that like the word that comes to mind is curiosity. You were just curious about everything.
Yeah. And it wasn't just about like what other people would say. Like I wasn't necessarily looking for their advice and
opinions.
It was more like I was more trying to tune into my reaction to things. So for me, it was like, it was really telling that I couldn't get enough of this podcast. It wasn't that I was looking for answers on the podcast. It was more like reassurance.
It sparked your intrigue.
I keep saying that during that time, there were so many signs. But the way that I believe in signs is that like, it's not a like, oh my God, it was a sign and it came out of nowhere. It's like, no, if you are subconsciously thinking about something, you will notice the signs.
100%. And also that like, if you're sitting on your ass and doing nothing about it, a sign's not going to drop in your lap.
Yeah. Whereas I was like, I was searching. I was in explore data gathering mode. That's how I handled that.
There's
for
a
certain time.
I think it's a biblical quote where
Ooh, go on.
where it's about God, but I believe in the universe, not God. Of like, God sends you a ship and you're like, no, I'm waiting for God, and like God sends you an airplane and like it's like, no, I'm waiting for God, and like all of those were God. Like, but like I don't believe in God, but I believe like that's actually how signs work. Of like, if you're looking for someone to literally hand deliver you the perfect job, it's not going to happen.
No.
But every so often you will have drops and clues and hints along the way that you just need to pay attention to.
Yeah. And I found myself just like really paying attention to the things that I noticed. And then the kind of like second half of that question was about like when you're kind of like settling in it, journaling. Just a lot of like, once I'd figured things out, it was like asking myself those questions of like, okay, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? And kind of planning it out. I did a lot of like financial forecasting as well of like, okay, what if I do a huge downsize? What if I do a medium-sized downsize? What if I do a small downsize? And just like doing loads of financial projections.
Another thing I tell people to do is if you don't have the answers, write down what you do know. Like, because you always know something, even if you know that you don't want to do something, that's one thing you do know. And actually, when you are insecure in the like uncertainty and feeling like very shaken up by that, actually just write down a list of things you do know. And that can be something that's reassuring, and at least like there are some constants and stability in your life.
Yeah.
Was it that you felt that you had said all you needed to say in sex education? I felt that way in body positivity. That's why I stopped posting it after 4 years, because I was like, I've said everything, and I could keep making. I think there's something about career satisfaction. It wasn't satisfying to say the same things over and over again.
Yeah, I was getting bored of myself, and I just felt ready to like pass the torch or baton or whatever relay.
The other thing you've spoken about is having imposter syndrome. You actually spoke about it when it came to sex education, because you were saying how you wanted to get qualified, and like that was a time when you were questioning part of your career, and like you wanted to have some qualifications behind what you were saying, and you did end up going on to get qualifications around it. But now that you are moving careers, do you find there's an aspect of imposter syndrome coming back?
Not really, because I'm kind of like very much at the beginning. So I'm very clear on like where I'm at in my new career with the coaching and the consulting. And my like position as somebody who like someone might want to hire and pay for my services is the 13, 14 years of knowledge and experience that I have. With the coaching, however, that's more the consulting, because that's kind of like actually where I'll have like expertise and advice and knowledge to share. With the coaching, that's something that kind of emerged throughout the consulting that I was doing of like, what you need here is actually more coaching. And actually I found myself coaching people a lot more than I was directly giving them advice. And so that was when I was like, oh, actually I want to explore certification and qualifications here. But that it didn't come from a place of like imposter syndrome. It came more from this place of like, oh no, I want to learn more. I want, like, this is clearly something that my clients want and need. And so I want to improve my skills so I can like better serve them.
I love that answer, because I actually hate the term imposter syndrome, because it's always only ever expected of women.
Yeah.
And I have been on so many panels where I keep being asked about imposter syndrome.
How do you deal with imposter syndrome? You're like, I'm fine.
At some point, you're like, if you keep asking me, it sounds like you're telling me I should have it, rather than go ask the man who's been working 10 years in an industry whether they have imposter syndrome. Because like, no, I don't have any, thanks. I'm qualified. I can give you my qualifications.
Yeah. And I'm really trying to embrace the fact that like, if somebody wants to hire me, then I'm good for the job.
And they have informed consent, and like,
they're an adult.
Enough. It's also that statistic around like men apply to jobs when they're 60%, 70% qualified. Women only apply when it's 100%.
Yeah.
The other question that my followers have asked is, do you think there's an element of privilege to be able to swap careers like that?
100%. And kind of like the privilege, I think, comes like in two different places. One is the fact that my husband, his salary has increased since mine has decreased, which is such a normal statistical phenomenon after like a man and a woman have a baby together.
Time.
Yeah. So whilst my business is an entire separate entity to our like combined personal income, it is reassuring that I can take risks like this because our personal income, whilst my business income very much gets affected, our personal income hasn't.
I think that's with privilege allows you to take more risks because the risks aren't as risky, especially when it comes to your like lifestyle and actually being able to pay the bills. Yeah. So in terms of your career change, what are you most excited about and looking forward to in terms of becoming a coach?
Well, I'm excited to actually do it. There's a certification, there's a course that I'm hoping to start next year. But really, it's more kind of like, feel like I've been in experiment mode this year. Like I haven't marketed myself. I haven't done any like actual outreach. I've just in my just casual like lifestyle videos, just been like, oh, this is the thing I'm doing. And I think if it's a testament to my career so far and the reputation that I've built in the creator industry, that people have like
approached
me and wanted to work with me. And so that's kind of been fun this year of like being in experiment mode and being like, what do you need? Like how, and also thinking for myself of like, how do I want to work with people? And like, what kind of dynamics and like structures do I want in the way that I work with clients? And so I now feel like I've got some answers to that, like after a whole year of doing it, and I'm ready to kind of formalize it a bit more next year. So like, you know, you couldn't go on my website all year and see like what my services are. You'd have to email me and we would chat. But I feel like I'm getting there and I'm ready to be like, oh, I can actually like put something on my website. I've been banking all the testimonials and I'm ready to like put them all out there.
Well, I'm excited for all of it to take off.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I'm really excited for is hopefully doing more like community stuff, like the networking kind of events, like peer-to-peer, like learning.
Well,
events.
I'm always game. I'm always up for that. Yes, okay, so we end every episode with something we are learning at the moment. Is there something you're working on, something you're not sure about, but you're like pondering and thinking about, or something that's just been on your mind a lot?
Yeah, so this is an entirely different realm of life. Friendships has been a big thing, very related to your book.
Oh, I feel you.
So like since having a baby and kind of like having my world be very local, I definitely like have been craving a lot more like local friends and like local community. And that's been like a really important thing for me. But it is hard because everybody is busy or, you know, it's just...
Everyone's an hour away. Everything's planned 3 months ahead of time.
Yeah, which isn't, like, that's fine for some friends that I have. Like, those are the relationships that we have. But in terms of, like, being a mum, I just want to, like, pop around to someone's house. I just, like, I need that local community. Like, I'm really craving it. And so me and my partner hosted our first, like, open house coffee morning recently.
Oh, my God, that's so cute.
Yeah, so we just sent the message out to, like, loads of our friends. And we're just like, this Sunday morning, like, open house, partner's kids welcome, like, come, like, we'll provide tea and coffee. And, yeah, loads of our, like, local family friends all came. All the kids were just like playing in Rowan's room and adults actually got to talk together, and we're going to host another one next month. And so hopefully it's going to become this like
community hub.
Like a regular thing that, and there's no pressure to like RSVP. It's not like you have to come. It's like, no, it's just an open house. Just like show up. It's fine.
I love that so much. I had a friend move in 8 minutes away from me, and it has changed my ability to have that. It's surprising how one person can make me feel like I have a community, because on the way back from a date, she just called me at 9 o'clock at night. It was like, I just coming back from a date, can I come over? And it's that, to be able to catch up in person versus like over the phone, it's different. The fact that I wasn't in and my friend needed a key and I was like, oh, go over to her house, she's 8 minutes away. Like, it's so small. Or like when I'm leaving the country and I have leftover food, I drop it off. Or like I have leftovers, I'm like, you want to come over for dinner? It's without the planning, it's the spontaneity of it. There were so many elements of it where it's really changed my life. And actually I think it is this thing of, you can live in London and still be an hour and a half away from someone. And it's just that proximity to someone, I think, is underestimated a lot. But also I've loved, Hannah's made a few videos around like the loneliness you felt, and I thought that was really brave as well, because I do think it's something that people experience in your 30s.
Oh, for sure. And especially since having kids when you're like, time is a lot more limited, but then also like your ability and your flexibility to travel 40 minutes to an hour across London, you're like, oh, but I can't do this time, and like childcare, and oh, I can come, but I'll have a 2-year-old with me, which then limits the amount of like connection you can have with whoever you're hanging out with. We're just trying our best, and hopefully by just like having a regular thing in the calendar, it just takes the pressure off, and it means that, you know, people can come. And
I love that. It's a great idea. The thing I'm learning at the moment is that I've had a whole year of no answers and not really knowing the future, and my future being turned upside down. But what I've realized is what I'm starting to realize is that it actually opens you up to being more flexible and more spontaneous. Like having an open diary is always seen as like a bad thing, of like you're looking at the diary and it's daunting to be like, God, I have no plans for Christmas. But actually by having that space, you allow for things to drop in. And so many of the things that happened this year was me staring at the diary being like, I like all my weekends overnight freed up. And like, you know what it's like being in a long-term relationship. Like there were too many family things, like your sister's birthday, my sister's birthday, like, and before you know it, like the first 3 months this year, I didn't have a single weekend to myself. And then I suddenly looked overnight, like all the weddings we had were cancelled, all the holidays we had over, like, and then I was, especially when I was looking at the summer, and I was like, it was the first time I started doing spontaneous things. Like I got invited on a date at like 8 o'clock at night, and I went at 10 o'clock. Like I was already in bed. Like, and I was like,
I got out of bed.
What's the worst thing that's going to happen? And it's not like I have much to do tomorrow either. But it's actually just opening myself up to the possibility, and it makes life really fun. So rather than, it's this trying to flip the mentality of making it a daunting thing and actually being like, no answers means lots of possibilities.
It is definitely a good thing, because I'm sitting here listening being like, oh, I wish. That sounds so good. I want a spontaneous life when you have it.
I'm really trying to get the mentality of this is my last time. Like treat it like it's the last time I'm going to be single, and actually like really, I always enjoyed being single, but I'm like putting it to the max. And like someone put in my Q&A this morning saying like, oh, are you not scared you're never going to settle down? And I was like, no, right now I feel so unburdened. And like, because trying for a baby, I mean, you also know this, trying for a baby is exhausting. It took up, I had hormones going through my body.
11 months in, baby, for trying for number 2.
Oh, for number 2. Well, like, because I was talking more about you shared that whole journey on the first one.
And that took a year.
And I was 6 months into mine, and it was just, it took so much out of me. And I don't think I realized how much it took out of me, that like, obviously I didn't want anything, what happened in my life, to happen this year, but to be able to go back to being single for a bit.
Enjoy it.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you, and how can people support you?
Yeah, so my main kind of like public platforms are Instagram, which is Hannah Witton, and then my YouTube channel, which what we call in behind the scenes of like being a
organizational finances,
creator, industry mum.
Also,
person.
If you're just nosy, like she shares a lot of information about finances.
There you go. So that's more Hannah.
And are you
YouTube.
actually taking career clients, coaching?
Yeah.
Well, if you're looking for a career coach,
I probably don't have room the end of this year, but yeah, get in touch, and maybe we can do something.
You can go on a waiting list.
Yeah. It's just because I'm due Vlognica in December, and so it's just like we're the busiest time. I do 8 videos over 8 days of Hanukkah, and so there's a lot of videos to produce right now, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do.
Well, then I appreciate you coming in even more.
Oh, we're like on the cusp, like it's starting like from when we're recording this, like it's kicking off like in 2 weeks.
Well, I appreciate it anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, then leave us a review. Make sure you hit follow and subscribe. And we'll be back next Tuesday.